Have you ever wondered if your dog can sense something you can't? The question echoed in Daniel's mind as he stepped into the bustling airport, Titan by his side. The canine dog, a trusted companion in countless missions, had always been calm, collected. But today, something was different. Titan's ears perked up, his nose twitching as if something in the air had changed. Daniel glanced down, sensing the tension in Titan's movements. "What is it, boy?" he muttered under his breath. As they walked through the crowded terminal, Titan's eyes suddenly locked onto a woman sitting by a window, cradling a baby in her arms. The woman, Sarah, seemed out of place among the business travelers and hurried families. She was alone, her weary eyes scanning the room, a quiet sadness in her expression. As Titan moved closer, he let out a sharp bark. The sound cut through the noise of the terminal, turning heads, causing people to stop and stare. Sarah looked up, startled, her hand instinctively clutching the baby a little tighter. Titan's gaze was fixed on the child, unblinking, as if he saw something only he could understand. Sarah's heart raced as she looked at the dog, then back at the man walking towards her. "Is he okay?" she asked nervously, her voice trembling. Daniel paused, looking at Titan, who was still standing at attention. "He's fine," Daniel replied, though the uncertainty in his voice made Sarah uneasy. But there was something about the way Titan stared at her baby, Lily, that made Sarah's blood run cold. She had never felt such an intense connection, a strange sense of recognition. Titan's eyes were filled with focus, as if he knew something no one else did. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Why is he looking at us like that?" she thought. Titan barked again, louder this time, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Daniel kneeled down next to Titan, whispering, "What is it, boy?" Titan's tail twitched slightly, but he didn't break his stare. Sarah watched as Daniel hesitated, then slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, rusted, and old. It was a key, an old brass key. "Where did you find that?" Sarah whispered to herself, barely able to breathe. It had been in her purse, tucked away for years, but she had never thought it meant anything. The key clinked softly in Daniel's hand, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Titan turned his head slightly, his eyes flicking between Sarah and the key, as if he recognized it. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The key felt significant, heavy with meaning, but what was it for? Titan continued to stare at her, his gaze unrelenting, as if urging her to remember something long forgotten. "What is it, Titan?" Daniel asked softly, his voice tinged with disbelief. For the first time, Daniel felt as if there was something larger than him at play, something beyond his understanding. The key and Titan's strange behavior were not coincidences. Something was happening, something that would change everything. Daniel stood there, still holding the old key in his hand, staring at Sarah. The moment felt like an eternity, the noise of the airport fading into the background. Sarah's heart raced as she looked at the key, her thoughts swirling. She had no idea why it was in her purse, but somehow, it felt important. The memory of it, tucked away in the corner of her mind, began to resurface. "This can't be," she whispered to herself, but the certainty in Titan's eyes told her otherwise. Daniel glanced down at Titan, whose calm demeanor had returned, but his gaze remained locked on Sarah and Lily. It was as if the dog knew something no one else did. "Where did you get that key?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "It was just in my coat pocket," Daniel replied, still unsure of what was happening. "But it's from the old house, isn't it?" Sarah's voice trembled as the realization hit her like a wave. Daniel froze. The old house. The one her grandmother had left her, the one she had never wanted to talk about. I didn't want to remember it," she continued, more to herself than to him. The house had always been a mystery, a place her family had abandoned years ago. No one ever spoke of it, and Sarah never questioned why. It wasn't until now, with Titan's strange reaction, that the memories began to surface. "What does this mean?" Sarah whispered, her fingers trembling as she reached out and took the key from Daniel's hand. Titan sat back on his haunches, watching intently as Sarah held the key, her grip tightening. The air around them seemed to shift. The once crowded airport felt strangely quiet, as if the world had paused to witness something significant. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to go back to that house, to the place she had spent so many years trying to forget. She had to know what was hidden there. I have to go, Sarah said, her voice firm but with a note of fear. Daniel looked at her, his brow furrowed. Are you sure? He asked. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. Sarah nodded, a small but determined smile crossing her face. I'm not alone, she said, glancing down at Lily, who was now asleep in her arms. She felt the weight of the key in her hand, but more than that, she felt the weight of the truth she had buried for so long. Titan's presence beside her was comforting, as though he was already guarding her, ready to lead the way. They made their way to the exit, the key feeling heavier with every step. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was calling her, pulling her back to that house. The one she had left behind. The one with secrets still waiting to be uncovered. Daniel followed behind, Titan trotting confidently at his side. As they walked through the doors of the airport, Sarah looked up at the sky, the setting sun casting long shadows on the ground. This is it, she whispered to herself, her voice filled with resolve. The past was coming back, and there was no turning away from it now. As the car sped down the winding road toward the old house, Sarah's thoughts raced. The air felt heavier, thick with the weight of the past, and the key in her hand seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Daniel sat beside her, glancing over at Sarah every now and then, but he said nothing. He knew better than to push her. This journey was one she had to take on her own terms. Titan, ever the vigilant companion, sat in the back seat, his eyes flicking between Sarah and the road ahead. It was as if he sensed the significance of the moment, his quiet presence a constant reassurance. Sarah's fingers tightened around the steering wheel as they passed the familiar landmarks of her childhood, but nothing seemed the same. The town had changed over the years, but the house, she could still see it in her mind, towering on the hill, standing like a forgotten monument to a past she never wanted to revisit. The house her grandmother had left her, the house she'd never set foot in after the will was read. It had always been a shadow in her life, a place full of questions she was never ready to answer. Now, it felt like fate was pushing her back to it, pulling her towards something she didn't fully understand. As they turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to the property, Sarah's heart began to race. Her palms were sweaty, her breath shallow. It felt like the world was holding its breath along with her. The house came into view, its silhouette framed by the setting sun. The walls were covered in ivy, the roof sagging under the weight of years of neglect. It looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades, just as she had left it. But something felt different now. The house seemed to be calling to her, its windows dark and empty, yet somehow watching. Sarah parked the car a few yards away, the crunch of gravel beneath the tires the only sound in the stillness. Titan leapt from the back seat, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He was on high alert, sensing something that Sarah couldn't yet see. What is it, boy? Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Titan barked once, sharply, before trotting toward the house. I guess we're not alone, Daniel said quietly, following Titan. Sarah hesitated for a moment, looking at the house before her. It was as if time had stopped, and she was standing on the threshold of a memory that had been locked away for far too long. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. Titan was already at the door, sitting patiently, waiting for her. She walked slowly toward him, the weight of the key in her pocket pressing against her side, as if urging her forward. As she reached the door, she took a moment to gather herself, her hand resting on the cold brass knob. She knew she couldn't turn back now. She had come this far, and whatever lay behind that door was a part of her story. The key fit perfectly into the lock, the metal scraping slightly as it turned. The door creaked open, and a rush of old, musty air hit her face. It smelled like dust and forgotten things, like the remnants of a life that had once been full of laughter and love. As Sarah stepped inside, she could almost hear the whispers of her grandmother's voice, a faint echo from the past. The house was just as she remembered, dimly lit, with dark wood floors and walls lined with faded wallpaper. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite place. Titan moved ahead, sniffing the ground as he led the way through the house. Sarah followed, each step feeling heavier than the last. She stopped in front of the staircase, her gaze falling on the small, dusty table at the foot of it. There, on the table, was an old photograph, its edges curled with age. She reached down to pick it up, her fingers trembling as she turned it over. It was a picture of her grandmother, standing in front of the house, holding a child in her arms. The child was Sarah. She had never seen this photo before. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Titan barked again, this time in a low, almost mournful tone. Sarah looked up, her heart racing. Something was hidden here, something the house had kept locked away for all these years. And now, it was ready to be uncovered. As Sarah held the photograph in her trembling hands, her mind raced. The image was so familiar, yet so strange. She had never seen this moment before, but there was no mistaking the child in her grandmother's arms. It was her, Sarah, as a little girl. Her breath caught in her throat as she studied the photo. Her grandmother's smile was warm, full of life, yet there was something behind her eyes, something hidden, as though she knew a secret that she could never share. Titan stood at attention beside her, his eyes focused on the photograph, as if he, too, recognized its importance. His ears perked, and he let out a low growl. Sarah could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She had to know what this meant, what her grandmother had kept from her. She turned the photograph over, hoping to find something, anything, that might explain this mystery. There, in the corner, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "The truth is buried beneath." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Buried beneath what? She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the old wooden floorboards. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about the house, about the secrets it held. But Sarah had always dismissed them as just stories, as things people tell to pass the time. She never thought they were real. Yet, now, standing in this house, surrounded by echoes of the past, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was waiting for her to uncover it. Titan barked again, his tail stiff with anticipation. Sarah followed his gaze to the floor, where he was now sniffing at a loose board. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she bent down to examine the spot. The board was slightly raised, just enough for her fingers to slip underneath. With a deep breath, she pulled at it, and the board creaked as it came loose. Beneath it was a small, dusty compartment. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What could be hidden here? She knelt down, her hands trembling as she reached inside. Her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. Slowly, she pulled it out. It was an old, tarnished key. This key looked almost identical to the one she had found earlier, but it felt different. Heavier, somehow. Titan watched her intently, his eyes never leaving her as she turned the key over in her hands. "What is this?" she whispered. Her voice echoed in the empty house. Could this be the key to the truth her grandmother had hidden? As Sarah examined the key, she noticed a faint engraving on its surface, something she hadn't seen before. The engraving was almost too worn to read, but after a few moments, the words became clear. "For when the time is right." The words sent a wave of realization crashing over her. This was it. This was the moment her grandmother had been waiting for. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she stood up, holding the key in her hand. Titan barked once more, as if urging her forward. "Let's see what this opens," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with determination. She looked around the room, the key feeling heavier in her hand. What was it meant to unlock? What secret had her grandmother left behind? She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, but for the first time, Sarah was ready to face it. Titan moved ahead, his nose twitching as he led the way toward the back of the house. Sarah followed, each step bringing her closer to the truth that had been hidden from her for so long. Whatever it was, she was ready. The house, the key, Titan, all of it had brought her here, to this moment. Now, it was time to find out what lay behind the door of the past. Sarah followed Titan through the narrow hallway, her mind racing with questions. The key in her hand felt like it was burning a hole through her palm, and with every step she took, the sense of urgency grew stronger. Titan, as if sensing her apprehension, moved ahead, his steady pace unwavering. The old house creaked and groaned, as if protesting the intrusion after so many years of silence. Sarah's heart pounded as she reached the door at the end of the hallway, a door she had never seen before. She had been in this house countless times as a child, but this door, this part of the house, was unfamiliar. She knew, without a doubt, that it held the answers she was seeking. Titan stopped at the door, his nose twitching, as if he too knew that this was the key to unlocking the mystery. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her hand trembled as she placed the key into the lock. The cold brass clicked into place with a satisfying sound. She turned the key, and the door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of old wood and forgotten memories filled the space. Sarah stepped inside, Titan close behind her. The room was filled with old furniture, covered in sheets, as though it had been abandoned for years. In the corner, a large wooden chest sat, its surface worn and scratched. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She moved toward the chest, her hands shaking as she reached out to lift the lid. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with the weight of history, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover what had been hidden. As she opened the chest, a wave of old memories rushed over her. Inside were letters, photographs, and a few old trinkets, all carefully packed away. But what caught Sarah's eye was a small, leather-bound book at the bottom of the chest. She reached in and pulled it out, the weight of it surprising in her hands. The cover was worn, the edges frayed with age, but the title was still legible, The Secret of the House. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened the book, her eyes scanning the pages. The handwriting was familiar, her grandmother's. She read the words aloud, barely whispering them as if afraid the house might overhear. The truth is buried beneath, where the heart once lived. The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She flipped through the pages, each one filled with her grandmother's thoughts, stories, and memories. The book was a journal, a diary of sorts, filled with details about the house and its past. As Sarah turned the pages, she came across a page that was almost entirely blank, except for a single sentence written at the bottom. Only when you return can the secret be revealed. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What did this mean? Was she supposed to return to the house, or had she already? The more she read, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Her grandmother had known something about this house, about Sarah's future, that she had kept hidden for all these years. Sarah closed the book gently, her mind racing. What had her grandmother meant by these words? What secret had been buried beneath this house, beneath the very foundation of everything Sarah had known? She looked at Titan, who sat quietly beside her, his eyes focused on the book in her hands. It was as if he, too, understood that this was only the beginning. Sarah stood up, clutching the book to her chest. She had come here to uncover the truth, but now she realized that the truth was only the first step. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secret her grandmother had left for her, Sarah was ready to face it. She was ready to uncover the rest of the mystery. With a steady hand, she placed the book back in the chest and closed the lid. The house had given up its first secret, but Sarah knew there was more to discover. She turned to leave the room, Titan at her side, ready to follow wherever the journey took her next. Sarah stood at the foot of the stairs, her mind still racing from what she had just discovered. The house felt different now, its walls no longer holding secrets, but instead whispering them to her. She had come here seeking answers, and she had found the first piece of the puzzle. But the question remained. What did her grandmother mean by the truth is buried beneath? Titan, ever the loyal companion, stood beside her, his nose twitching as if urging her to keep moving. He had sensed something in this house that Sarah still couldn't fully understand. She looked at the darkened hallway ahead, where shadows clung to the edges of the walls, and something deep inside her told her that the answers she was looking for were hidden there, just out of reach. With a determined breath, she made her way toward the staircase. Titan followed closely behind, his presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone in this. As she ascended the stairs, the creaking wood beneath her feet seemed to echo in the silence of the house. The air was thick with dust, untouched by time or the world outside. She reached the top of the stairs and turned down the hallway. The house was cold now, the warmth it once held fading with each step. Sarah stopped in front of a door she had never noticed before, a door that seemed to be calling to her. The door was smaller than the others, tucked away at the end of the hallway, almost as if it had been deliberately hidden from view. The wood was worn, and the edges were chipped, but it felt significant. Sarah's fingers brushed against the handle, and she hesitated for a moment, unsure of what she would find on the other side. Titan sat quietly at her feet, his eyes focused on the door, as if he knew this was the final step in uncovering the mystery. With a deep breath, Sarah turned the handle and slowly pushed the door open. It creaked as it moved, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The room was filled with old furniture, covered in sheets, and dust hung in the air like a heavy fog. But it was what lay in the corner of the room that caught Sarah's attention. A large, ornate mirror stood against the wall, its frame intricately carved, though covered in layers of dust. She walked toward it, the feeling of being drawn to it intensifying with every step. The mirror was framed by golden vines, their edges faded with age. It looked like something out of a dream, something from a past life that no one had ever spoken of. Sarah reached out and wiped away the dust from the glass. The reflection that met her eyes was not her own. Instead, she saw a different image, her grandmother, standing in front of the mirror, holding a candle. Her face was solemn, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. In the reflection, Sarah could see her grandmother's lips moving, as if she were saying something, but the words were muffled, as though the mirror itself was keeping the secret. Sarah's heart raced as she leaned closer, her breath fogging up the glass. She reached out, her hand hovering above the surface, but before she could touch it, a low growl escaped Titan. He was standing in the doorway, his body tense, his eyes fixed on something behind her. Sarah turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat. The room was empty. There was no one there. But the air felt different, heavier, as if something unseen was watching her. Titan growled again, his eyes narrowing. Sarah stepped back from the mirror, her mind spinning. What was happening? She had come here seeking answers, but now she felt as though the house was closing in on her, as if it had a life of its own, a secret it was determined to keep. Titan's growl turned into a soft whine, and Sarah could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming, something that had been waiting for her to uncover the truth. She glanced back at the mirror, her heart racing. Her grandmother's face was still there, staring back at her, her expression one of warning. Sarah knew that whatever lay ahead, whatever secret the house held, it was ready to reveal itself. But was she ready to face it? Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped back from the mirror, her breath shallow. Titan's growl had stopped, but the air in the room felt charged, as if something was stirring beneath the surface, just waiting to be discovered. She glanced over her shoulder again, but the room was still empty. No one was there. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, an invisible presence pressing in from all sides. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached out and touched the mirror. The cool surface of the glass sent a jolt through her fingertips, but as she touched it, something unexpected happened. The mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. Sarah pulled her hand back, her eyes wide with disbelief. The reflection of her grandmother was still there, but now, the image shifted, as if trying to tell her something. The soft whisper of her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, faint but clear. You must understand. The past cannot be undone, but it can be revealed. Sarah's pulse quickened. What did that mean? Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind, and as she stared into the mirror, the room seemed to fade away, leaving only the reflection of her grandmother holding the candle. The air grew colder, and Sarah felt a sudden pressure in her chest, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, the reflection began to change again. The image of her grandmother faded, replaced by something else, an old wooden door, familiar yet distant, standing at the far end of a dark hallway. Sarah felt an overwhelming pull toward the door, as if the house was trying to tell her something. That's it, she whispered to herself. The door. It was the same door from her childhood, the one that her grandmother had always kept locked. She had been forbidden from going near it, and as a child, she never questioned it. But now it all made sense. The key, the mirror, her grandmother's words. The truth was hidden behind that door. Titan, who had been standing silently beside her, suddenly turned and trotted toward the doorway. Sarah followed, her footsteps tentative but determined. The hallway stretched out before her, the same dark, narrow passage she had remembered, but now it felt different. The walls seemed to close in, as though the house was guiding her, urging her forward. She stopped in front of the door, her hand resting on the cold brass knob. The key was still in her pocket, heavy and unyielding. She pulled it out and placed it into the lock. The key turned easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment, and the door creaked open. A wave of cold air rushed past her, sending a chill through her bones. She stepped inside, and for a moment, everything felt still. The room was small, dust-covered, and dark, But in the center of the room was an old chest, its surface worn and cracked with age. The chest was closed, but something about it called to her. She walked toward it, her hand outstretched, and as she touched the lid, the air seemed to hum with energy. She could feel her grandmother's presence in the room, a comforting yet haunting reminder of the past. With a deep breath, Sarah opened the chest. Inside, there were letters, photographs, and small trinkets, but at the bottom of the chest, wrapped in old fabric, was something that made her heart stop: a small wooden box. The box was intricately carved, with symbols she didn't recognize. It felt ancient, as though it had been passed down through generations. Sarah carefully lifted the box, her fingers trembling. As she opened it, a soft glow emanated from within. Inside was a note, written in her grandmother's handwriting. The truth is not lost, but waiting to be found. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. The secret her grandmother had kept hidden all these years was finally within her reach. Titan, standing at her side, barked once, a low, almost reverent sound. Sarah looked down at the box, her heart racing. Whatever was inside, it would change everything. She was ready to know the truth, to uncover the secrets the house had been hiding for so long. Sarah stared at the small wooden box in her hands, her heart racing as the soft glow from within illuminated the dark room. Titan sat quietly beside her, his eyes fixed on the box, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. The note inside the box had confirmed what Sarah had feared. There was more to her family's history than she had ever been told. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The truth is not lost, but waiting to be found. The weight of those words pressed down on her chest, and Sarah felt a strange mix of dread and excitement. She gently unfolded the note, her fingers trembling. The message inside was short, but the meaning was clear. It was a map, drawn with careful, steady strokes. The map was old, the edges frayed and yellowed, but the lines were still sharp. At the center of the map was a small X, marking a location deep in the woods behind the house. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a place she had never seen before, yet it felt strangely familiar. She turned the map over, hoping for more details, but there was nothing else. Just the silent promise that the truth lay beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered. Sarah stood up, clutching the map tightly in her hand. Titan stood with her, his tail slightly wagging, sensing that something was about to happen. She knew she had to go, that the map would lead her to the final answers. But as she walked toward the door, her mind swirled with uncertainty. What would she find? Was she ready to face whatever secrets had been hidden in these woods for so long? She stepped outside into the cold night air, the sky above her dark and clear. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Sarah felt as if the house itself was watching her, waiting. Titan trotted ahead, leading the way, his nose twitching as he picked up the scent of something in the air. Sarah followed, the map gripped tightly in her hand. The woods behind the house had always been a place of mystery for her. As a child, she had been told to stay away, but now, with the weight of her grandmother's secret pressing down on her, she had no choice but to venture into the unknown. The ground beneath her feet was soft, the leaves crunching underfoot as she made her way through the trees. The path was narrow, barely visible in the moonlight, but Titan seemed to know exactly where he was going. Sarah's thoughts raced as she followed him, the map burning a hole in her pocket. What if the truth was too much to bear? What if the secret was one that would change everything she thought she knew about her family? As they moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in around them. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, watching her every move. Titan stopped suddenly, his ears perked, his body tense. Sarah stopped behind him, holding her breath. Ahead, the trees parted slightly, revealing a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old stone well, its surface worn and weathered with age. The well was overgrown with vines, and the stones around it were cracked, but it felt ancient, as though it had been standing there for centuries. Titan moved forward, sniffing around the well, then looked back at Sarah. He seemed to be waiting for her to make the next move. Sarah's heart pounded as she stepped closer to the well. The map had led her here, and now she understood why. This was the place where the truth would be revealed. She crouched down beside the well, running her fingers over the cold stone. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, she felt as if the past was reaching out to her. She took a deep breath, then leaned over the edge of the well. The darkness inside seemed to stretch on forever, but there was something else, a glimmer of light at the bottom, barely visible. Sarah knew what she had to do. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the key, and held it up to the moonlight. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. With a steady hand, she dropped the key into the well, watching as it disappeared into the darkness below. A moment passed, and then the ground beneath her feet shifted. The well seemed to groan as if something deep within it was awakening. Titan barked, and Sarah stepped back, her heart racing. The earth rumbled beneath her, and a loud crack echoed through the trees. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the ground before the well split open, revealing a hidden passage leading deep into the earth. The truth was waiting for her. She could feel it. With one last glance at Titan, she stepped forward, ready to uncover the final secret that had been hidden for so long. Sarah took a cautious step forward, her eyes fixed on the dark, shifting passage that had opened before her. Titan was already in motion, moving quickly and confidently, as if he had known this moment would come. Sarah followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The air around her was thick with anticipation, and every step she took seemed to echo through the stillness of the night. The ground beneath her feet felt unstable, as if the very earth was shifting, reacting to the truth that was finally being uncovered. As she descended deeper into the passage, the coolness of the air intensified, and the walls began to narrow, forcing Sarah to move more slowly. The flickering light from the moon above barely reached down into the tunnel, leaving her in near total darkness. Titan, however, moved with ease, his paws silent on the stone floor, his senses alert to every sound and shift in the air. Sarah felt a surge of trust in him, as if he was guiding her, leading her through this final trial. The passage was tight, but Sarah pressed on, driven by the same force that had brought her to this moment. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of the weight of the secrets she was about to uncover. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but then, just as Sarah thought she could go no further, the path opened up into a small chamber. The walls of the chamber were lined with stone, covered in ancient carvings that Sarah couldn't quite understand, but their presence was undeniable. There was something sacred about this place, something that felt both terrifying and awe-inspiring. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal was an old book. The book was bound in dark leather, its surface worn with age, but it gleamed with an unnatural light. Sarah stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. This was it, the book that had been waiting for her all along. She reached out, with trembling hands, and as her fingers brushed against the cover, the air around her seemed to shift, growing heavier, more charged. Titan, standing by her side, let out a low growl, but Sarah didn't flinch. She knew this was the moment her grandmother had prepared her for. She carefully opened the book, revealing pages filled with detailed sketches, symbols, and notes in her grandmother's handwriting. The first page was a map, similar to the one she had found earlier, but this one was more detailed, showing a hidden part of the land around the house. There, marked clearly in the center, was the location she had just come from, the clearing with the well. The map detailed an ancient ritual, one that had been passed down through the generations, and Sarah realized with a jolt that it was her family's legacy. Her grandmother had been the keeper of this secret, and now, Sarah was the one who would carry it forward. As she continued to read, the words became clearer, revealing the purpose of the ritual. It wasn't just about uncovering hidden truths. It was about protecting something far greater, something that had been buried beneath the earth for centuries. The truth wasn't just a secret, it was a responsibility. Sarah's fingers hovered over the next page, and as she turned it, a symbol appeared, one that she recognized from the carvings in the chamber. It was a family crest, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen. This was the symbol of her bloodline, the one her grandmother had kept hidden from her all these years. The final page contained a single sentence. Only the worthy may unlock the final door. Sarah's heart raced as the meaning of those words sank in. The journey she had started had led her here, but the real test was yet to come. She had uncovered the truth, but now she had to prove she was worthy of it. Titan looked up at her, his eyes filled with understanding. Together, they had reached the end of this part of the journey, But Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. With the book in her hands and the weight of her family's secret pressing down on her, she stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next.